Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the interactive version of One Square at a Time for the episode that we did on Hermione. And although I was hoping that my guest, Brandon, would be on the show with us today, our co-host, he is getting some work done on his car so that he could come out to Vegas here next week and be a part of a show where he's going to be receiving 3 separate awards for his Delight CBD product, as well as for Delight Digital Cafe that we're working on right now. It's been a while since the last time that we were on here, and I am really looking forward to interacting with the audience today. Not sure exactly how many people will be out there today. I know that some people wanted to be there, but were not available. So we'll just see how things go. Anyhow, Delight Digital Cafe is an amazing platform that Brandon and I have been working on in order to be able to bring positivity and tools and helping others to be able to just look at life in a much more balanced and positive perspective. Oftentimes today in the world, we just don't have that same level of and apologize for a little bit of side activity going on here. I'm trying to get something to come up so that I can make sure that I can see people from Facebook, which sometimes if you're coming in from Facebook, it doesn't transfer over to StreamYard so that I can see your comments unless you have your privacy settings in Facebook indicating that anything that you post is public or for public appearance viewing. A lot of times, even myself, I have my Facebook really set so that my comments are available to friends and friends of friends, but not necessarily open to the general public. And if that's the case, then those comments don't get put over into our StreamYard comment section, and I cannot see them. So apologize if anybody's in that situation. Was really trying to see if we could find a better way to do that. So let me check just one more thing here real quick. And it looks like there are some challenges from the comments perspective in Facebook, but so be it. All right. If you are in YouTube, I should be able to see your comments and we can interact from there. Now, Hermione was an amazing character, I believe, from the Harry Potter series in that she presented a very strong role model, if you want to call it that, for the not only the women, but also for the men in the world today, in that oftentimes the strength of the characters of women in movies have been kind of behind the male protagonist or whatever. And I think that is very much being recognized in today's world. And they are doing things in a way that that are acknowledging that, so that the women's perspective. Hey, Lena, nice to see you out there. Looking forward to any comments that you may have. It's fantastic to have family and friends from Sweden tuning in. So that's very late in the evening for them, and I appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. As I was saying, having a good role model for younger women or girls in particular, I think is very important, because then they can continue to grow with that understanding in mind that I don't need to dumb myself down in order to be accepted. It's not my role to stand behind the men or whomever in my life. I can stand on my own 2 feet. I can take the stage. I can stand in the front, and I can support myself and my friends in any way possible. Anders, hey, nice seeing you out there. That's fantastic. Another cousin from Sweden tuned in, so that's phenomenal. And again, just reminding everybody, if you have any comments, questions, things along the lines of how Hermione or anything in particular with regard to feminine energy, girl power, and so forth, bring those to my attention. We'll talk about them either from the comments, or I should be able to bring you on screen if you want. So back to Hermione. She's I think been an amazing role model for girls and boys alike. I think that the whole Harry Potter series really drew the equality of the sexes together, the equality of the masculine and feminine energy. And feminine and masculine energy exist in both men and women. So take advantage of that. And if you can draw upon both the masculine and feminine energy, you're going to be able to understand the world in a whole different way, a way that's going to be able to connect to more people than if you just came at it from one perspective or the other. I talked about that in that Hermione was a very inquisitive girl. She was precocious in that she was kind of mature for her age in the movie, actually throughout the movie. And she was also very much inquisitive, meaning she always asked questions. She always did the research. She backed things up, but she was very focused on getting as much of the truth as she could based on everything that was going on around her. And that was where I really found a kind of a connection with myself. When I was growing up, I was kind of, the same as Hermione. I was the teacher's pet. And with being the teacher's pet, sometimes you do get picked on, or you're misunderstood, or they think that you're just trying to show that you're smarter than others. And that's not really the case. The case is you did the work. You understand what's going on. You want to get your questions answered, which may be different and sometimes maybe more in depth than others that haven't done the work or the studying or even just thought about it from kind of a devil's advocate perspective. And that's another thing that in life is very, very important. And I think that this is something where Hermione really balanced Harry and Ron in the movie, in that she looked at things from a different perspective. She kind of played that devil's advocate, like, okay, yeah, this is what we see. This is what we're feeling right now. But what about the, coming at it from somebody else's perspective, coming at it from one of the villain's perspective? Because when you are able to look at both your perspective and those of others, you can create a much more well-rounded response to what's going on in life. And oftentimes when things appear to be coming against you, and you really open up your mind and step kind of outside of the box and outside of your comfort zone, that's where you get to realize that no, it's not that they're coming at you specifically. It may be that the position that you're taking is different than their belief systems. And when I talk about belief systems, I'm talking about the things that have been formed as the foundation of how we look at life from the time that we were born, through our religious learnings, through our school learnings, through our parents, through our friends, through our peer groups, through the media, and from whatever we happen to focus on comes into our mind and becomes oftentimes part of our belief system. We don't even consciously think about it. It just happens. And as a result, oftentimes our belief systems are not ours, but they are the belief systems of those that are around us. And that's something that I've talked about many times in previous episodes, and I will continue to bring it up because it is such a critical component of how the world is perceived by us. And our perception is our reality, even though the events that we may have placed meanings on are different from our specific perspective. And that's where oftentimes, we have times when we say, this always happens to us, or this is, why is it always happening to me? Why do I always make this mistake? Why do I never get the benefits? Why? And we generalize things. And oftentimes that's part of our belief system. It's part of the way that we were trained, that we kind of project some of our concerns about ourselves, our inadequacies, things along those lines, and we project it onto an event, and then we take it back in and filter it through our belief systems again, and it reinforces, because one of the critical things that we have to understand is that our mind will do whatever it takes to bring our actions and our thoughts in line with our current identity. And when I say current identity, it's because our identities can change. In fact, our identities oftentimes, or our belief systems, are oftentimes situational, meaning that if I may be a believer in the sanctity of life, and I would never do anything to take the life of somebody else. And when you say never would I do that, then you bring up a situation that's like, well, if somebody is threatening my child, my mother, my friends, would I take them out in order to protect my child, my mother, my friends? And all of a sudden, that thing that you said you would never do becomes a possibility and may become a reality. It's something that, having a military background is something that comes up all the time when you go to war, because most people are not geared to taking anybody's life. So when you go to war, and that's a potential, in fact, that's part of your job if they are attacking you or your friends or the country or whatever, you have to get past that core belief system by saying, hey, I don't believe in killing other people, but in this situation, it becomes required. So that's just kind of a side thought, but let's go back to Hermione and kind of the way that she looked at life. She was, again, always trying to find the answers. She tended to be very good at framing her questions in a more positive perspective, as opposed to saying, why can't I? It was always, how can I? And as opposed to, I don't know why or how to figure this out, it is like, how can I find a way to find the villain, find out why our villains are coming after us. She did it in a positive way. And when you ask questions in that positive way, like, how can I overcome? Or what will it take to overcome something? That's when the universe will actually bring in the answers to you in that light, because when your mind is controlled by your questions. So if you want to have a better life, ask better questions. And Hermione tended to do that and put things into perspective. Sometimes Ron would go down a rabbit hole, or Harry would be focused on something, and Hermione would bring it back into perspective in a way that basically said, no, Harry, they're not always after you. They're after Voldemort's after you because you're the one who survived his death curse, which has never happened in the past to Voldemort. When Voldemort was trying to kill Harry as a baby, he killed Harry's parents, but love protected Harry. That was a great thing. But then, throughout the whole Harry Potter series, it's really about Voldemort coming back and really trying to get back to becoming in full control. And Harry was really the one person, or the one witch or warlock that really intimidated Voldemort, because Voldemort couldn't kill him the first time as a very little baby. So Hermione, took these things that were going on around them, and she framed them in a way that was more open to the universe bringing the answers. And when I say the universe does, yeah, you can just sit there and say, and you go into your meditative state, and oftentimes the answers do come. But guess what? Most of the time you actually have to do some active work. You have to do some research. You have to reach out to others. You have to look at things from a different perspective. And then those answers come to you. So it's not all about just waiting for the answers to come, but to actively, or to take action to get those answers, to take action to test those hypotheses, to take action to actually complete a thought. And as I was mentioning, the questions actually, they trigger your amygdala or your reticular activating system. So when you start asking for help in a positive perspective, then those answers that come to you in a very positive way that you can leverage and use to overcome the challenges, obstacles, or take advantage of the opportunities. Because oftentimes we tend to think that, life has got nothing but obstacles. But you know what? An obstacle flipped upside down really is an opportunity. So look at it from an opportunity, like, okay, my car is broken and I can't, I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere. Well, what is that opportunity? Well, the opportunity is, first of all, how to figure out how to make things better. How can I get my situation? How can I resolve my situation? Do I stay with the car? Do I move to somewhere else? Do I walk back to the last exit and try to get somebody to help? Do I, wave down cars that may be coming by? What also can I observe around me that actually can be very, something that I wouldn't have observed before? So there's opportunities that come out of that. The other thing that Hermione really brings up, and I think is extremely important to the both boys and girls, men and women, I guess I shouldn't say both, all of them, is that you have to be brave. You have to be brave enough to stand up to your opposition, to your villains, but oftentimes you have to stand up to your friends as well. And when I say that, when you are with your friends, they may be influencing you to go into a particular direction, to do a particular thing, to act in a particular way. When you're part of a clique, or you're part of a gang, oftentimes you are following what that leader is telling you, or that you're following the group think. And sometimes you need to stop. In fact, I would say not sometimes, but most of the time, you need to stop and think about what's being said or what people are about to do, and decide, is that really what is me? Does that really serve me? Or am I just getting caught up in the moment? Am I getting caught up in the in the group think, and I'm just going to follow people regardless of if I know that this is the right thing to do or the wrong thing. And there's, I think, a really good example here in the United States back on January 6th, when that group went to Congress, and then they started to break in. They went through the cordon, then they started to break windows, then they went inside, then they started to trash things. And, some people actually lost their lives. And others are now, being put in jail or are going to be going to court. Why is that? Because they got so caught up in the moment that they didn't stand back enough and say, wait a second, this isn't right. We have an opportunity to change this country. That's what the vote is about. They were moving in a direction believing that the vote wasn't done properly. Our votes weren't counted properly. But if you stand back and say, okay, well, wait a second, whether it was or whether it wasn't, breaking into the doors of Congress, breaking into the windows, climbing through and doing destruction to our politicians, to our legal system, because legislation actually creates laws, and to recognize that that isn't the right thing to do. And because of that, many of the people are paying the price now, and one paid for sure with her life, and some of the defenders of Congress did the same thing. So bravery is about also saying, wait a second, even though I'm part of this group, even though I'm all excited about doing something, I have a limit that I have in my beliefs. And I believe that most people wouldn't have done that if they were doing, just there on their own. But because they were part of the group, they got caught up into it and they move forward. And this is where you have to step back. You have to be brave enough to say, okay, I appreciate, we are all thinking the same way, but what you're wanting to do and what I believe in are different. And I'm not going to follow you through the doorway. I am going to stay back and civilly protest, which is something that we all have the right to do. And Hermione actually demonstrated that, where she actually had to place a spell on Neville because Neville was trying to stop Hermione and Harry and Ron from trying to find the Sorcerer's Stone. They were pursuing a path, and she decided, Neville stood up and said, no, you're going to get us in trouble. Well, in this case, they actually needed to move past that in order to get to where they could find the Sorcerer's Stone, where Harry could actually find it. And she had to put a petrifying curse on Neville in order to stop him from stopping them, so that they could move forward. So I'm not saying that all the time, the group think is wrong. I'm just saying you need to evaluate each and every situation. And when people talk about leadership, just like when I talk about leadership, and people ask, what's your leadership style? I say, my leadership style is situational. It depends on the situation. There are times in life where you can be democratic and you can get everybody's input, and then you can do what the consensus wants to do. But there's other times where you have to take charge and say, nope, sorry, Neville, I'm going to have to put you aside so that we can move forward. And I'm taking control. I'm casting the spell. I am doing that type of thing so that we can all progress together. I see where Fernando is saying that, Hermione would be stronger than Harry if she wasn't a Muggle. I think that Hermione probably is as strong as Harry, to be honest. She just was a part of Harry's team, recognizing that at least in terms of getting to Voldemort, there was only one person that was really going to be able to take Voldemort out, and that was Harry, and that is all because of the way that Voldemort could not kill Harry when he tried in the past. So that's where I think that, what J.K. Rowling did in creating the character of Hermione, of Molly Weasley, there are many very strong, positive, feminine or women role models in the Harry Potter series, which really equate to the strength of the male role models, whether even Professor McGonagall and Professor Dumbledore. Yeah, Dumbledore was kind of looked at as the pinnacle, but it was also Professor McGonagall's support that really was able to enable the momentum of the wizards and the witches to protect Hogwarts and everybody as you start going more toward, the latter part of the Harry Potter series. Now, Bellatrix, yes. Fernando brings up Bellatrix. Bellatrix was a bitch, absolutely. And she represents the evil villain, but also what I liked about Bellatrix, in particular Bellatrix, but there were others, the strength of the villainess, the strength of her conviction to Voldemort and the Death Eaters and so forth. She had a tremendous superpower. And remember, superpowers are not always positive or negative. They can be both. And in fact, in one person, you can have both a positive and a negative superpower. One superpower could be used both positively and negatively. So that's where there was an amazing, I think, how J.K. Rowling just created these characters and brought out the fact that, there's very strong villainesses as well as villains. And it's all about how you use those powers. Now, I see that Jessica is saying, I love her transformation throughout the series. She started very book smart and then became more street smart at the end. For me, she embodies balance, masculine, feminine energy. Can't agree with you more, Jessica, on that. Hermione, and this is what happens, with kids. Oftentimes we say, you're book smart or you're street smart. And you do need to get your nose out of the books in order to open up your perspective and to gain and balance that book smart with what's going on in the world around you. It's about balancing or taking into different perspectives, as I mentioned, as in order to really leverage what we learn in books in life. When I was implementing computer systems in logistics, one of the things that I used to always say is that the strategic consultants would come in and they'd give you this grandiose plan based on the theoretical things that could happen in terms of how you can make your business better. And then they would turn it over to my side of the house, which is implementation. And the very first thing that I would have to do is say, okay, I appreciate what the strategic guys put together and say can happen. But guess what? When you bring that theory into reality, you bring people into your business, which that is the name of my business. Businesses are people too. When you bring people into the equation, that theory may not be possible. The theories tend to be around ideal situations, and life is rarely an ideal situation. And you have to take into consideration that street smart and bring it back to where people can do certain things and what people are willing to do in order to be able to overcome obstacles, implement new ways of doing business, implementing new things in life. There's the theoretical stuff that psychologists tell you can happen, and then there's the reality of being able to say, okay, this is a concept. It can, and we need to look at it, but implementing it in our life may take a while. It may take changing it a bit. It may take looking at it a bit differently, because the reality of life is not the same as the theory behind which most of these hypotheses and oftentimes political systems and policies are built on theory, not on the reality of people actually wanting to follow those types of things. So Jess also brings up, it's so cool to think about if Hermione even Ron and Harry didn't go through all the real life application, would they be as brilliant of wizards as they became to be? And that, I think, is going exactly along with what I was just talking about. If you're a wizard, or if you're a professor in a college and you teach and only understand the theory, and you've actually never been out on the street to actually try and implement it or see how it works out on the street, then your strength and your ability to really connect with people is limited. And, they have, I've heard this many times before, I don't know if you have, where they say those who can do, those who can't teach. And there's some real application to that. I went through college, I went through, and got my master's degree. I've been through a lot of different things, excuse me. And as I was saying about like the strategic consultants, or sometimes even the salesmen in your company, they talk about things in a very theoretical, ideal situation, which when you try to do what they say or what they sold, it doesn't work the way that it was stated. And that has to do with really bringing real life application into the things that you learn, or bringing the theoretical into the reality. If you've got the street smart and then you go back and do some research to take a look at some of the theoretical things and you blend them together, you're going to come up with a much, I think, stronger plan for how life really can be and what can be done, as opposed to what is theoretically capable, or just the street smart, without taking into consideration that there are some theories out there that can be used to validate, support, or improve what you're thinking about if you only have the street smarts. And street smarts are critical. Oftentimes, and I know we're getting in a little bit of a different sidetrack here, but I think it's very important, because whether we're talking about the wizards and witches in Hogwarts, or we're talking about the gangs and the groups out in life, there are some extremely smart people that never went to college. I mean, even some of the greatest businessmen never went to college. Some of the greatest scientists never went to college. It was about being able to be more street smart, and then bringing in and doing the research and figuring out how to make that happen. But there are some tremendously smart kids that end up going into gangs, and they say that they're going into gangs because they want to create problems. No, that's not true. Oftentimes they're looking for a family unit. They're looking for people that are of like mind, even though that like mind may not be in line with society norms. And some of them take it beyond that, and then they do some criminal activities and so forth. But the brilliance of the minds behind them are amazing. So never discount a person and their capabilities based on the organization they may be associated with, because each individual needs to be looked at as an individual. And when we do that, we not only find out that they can be smarter than we thought or more capable than we thought, but they are also more like me than I thought. because I would venture to guess that 90 to 95% of the things that we all want in life, we want a safe place to live. We want to be able to have food on the table. We want to be able to provide for our families. We want to be able to have a safe environment. We want to be able to grow. We want to be able to learn. We want to be able to earn. Those are all things that I think are, in general, the same across the entire human race. It is that 10% or that 5% or that 1% of things where we differ in the way that we view life that is what causes conflict, what causes war, what causes us versus them, what causes black versus white, what causes red versus blue. We live in we need to recognize we live in the gray. We live in the spectrum of color. We live in a spectrum of energy that is beyond what we can see. It's beyond the frequencies that we can hear. It's in the ultraviolet. It's in the infrared. It's in the energy of the universe. And we need to recognize that's what we live in. We don't live in just black and white. We don't live in just red or blue. It's not just us or them. It's one race, the human race, and to recognize and to appreciate differences in beliefs and thoughts, because it's that generates new ideas. And when I say new ideas, I don't really mean that. My belief is that there is no such thing as new ideas. It's about bringing together information that in a different way. It's not that information didn't exist. It's not that the math wasn't there. It's not that the theories weren't there, but it was the way that we now connected the math in a different way than we had before with the theory, and we come up with the theory of relativity. We come up with quantum physics. We come up with new policies and politics, and that's really where we're going, I think, also in terms of just the acceptance of people in general today, to get past this bullshit about color, race, creed, sexual orientation. That's all bullshit, because that's that minor, 10 or 5% or 1% that I'm talking about. But yet that is the part that is dividing ourselves. And when we divide, we do not achieve as much as if we can work together. You know what they say, like divide and conquer. That's how you destroy the United States from within. If we can divide our country into many different pieces, it's much easier to influence and to break our core values down and out of our society, because we have now created conflict within the society. And we don't have to the enemy doesn't have to go to war with us. They're just pushing to have everybody kind of conflict with each other because of this very small amount of things that we actually don't see eye to eye with. And that's where we really need to focus on. So Fernando talks about, right, all the struggle we went through they went through. This is Harry now, but it's also we in general. We were forced them to become more powerful wizards than they became. Yes, it's the struggles of life that also make us stronger, to make us overcome barriers and challenges that might otherwise stop others. It is really being able to experience life, to leverage the learnings of others, to be a part of, and to also be strong enough to stand back away and look at things from a different perspective, so that we can bring in new ways and new ideas in terms of thinking. Hey, Wendy, nice to see you out there. I'm glad that you were able to tune in. We're just continuing to move forward with our discussion of how Hermione really brings out the strength of girl power, feminine energy, and to recognize that feminine energy and even that girl power, if guys get away from this machismo kind of thing and recognize that, yes, my feminine energy, my ability to have intuition, my ability to listen, my ability to be empathetic, as opposed to my ability to be strong and take action before thinking and not listen but talk and that kind of stuff is really critical to having this toolkit in life, which really the toolkit that I brought out here was a tape measure. And when I talk about a tape measure, I'm using it when I mean being precise about how we look at life, being precise about the questions that we ask. Don't ask those general questions like, why does this always happen to me? Why does the world, why is it against me? It's, let's look at that very specific event that's drawing you to that question and say, okay, let's take something a lot of us have experienced where somebody cuts you off on the road. And you're like, why does somebody always cut me off on the road? Every time I'm going down the highway, somebody's out there and they're just doing dumb stuff, and it's going to get in an accident. It's putting me in danger. And then sometimes you get people justify this whole road rage crap about that. It is because they have generalized what's happening. You've got thousands of cars that go past you every day that don't cut you off. But that one that did, you remember, and it becomes part of that reticular activating system I mentioned. And now another time that may happen, which may be a week from now, a month from now, you're like, well, there it is again. It just proved everybody is doing this. No, during that time, 10,000 cars went past you and never cut you off. So be precise and say, oh, okay, this guy did this. I don't know what's going on in their mind. Maybe they're rushing somebody to the hospital and they're trying to get there real quick. Maybe they had a bad day and they're just, trying to get home before, they lose it all. There's many different reasons that people do what they do, and we don't know what's going on behind their minds. Just like in Harry Potter, we get an opportunity to kind of watch it from the outside and see all these different things taking place. But if you are that individual character in the movie, in the book, you don't have the benefit of seeing what Harry is thinking, what Voldemort is thinking, what Bellatrix is thinking. You don't have that background, so you're responding. And oftentimes I say we're reacting because we haven't thought about it enough to actually respond. That we blame things on people that are really oftentimes our own inadequacies, or how we feel inadequate about ourselves, and we project them on others. And we say that, because there's times that we've actually cut people off on the road too. We may not recognize it. The guy behind us did. They may come around and try to, shake their finger at you. Hopefully that's all they do. But there's times that we make mistakes too. And it's not always, the case that happens. And that overgeneralization, as, Jessica is saying, overgeneralization is something that I say that myself even, worked on personally and started speaking about. This is what we have to recognize, is that we do that. I do that. We all do those things. And it's not that you're ever going to stop doing that. The key is that we recognize that can happen. We recognize that we have our own biases, that we have our own belief systems, and oftentimes that our belief systems are bullshit. That belief system may have served us when we were in a particular situation or when we were a kid, but it doesn't serve us as an adult. It may have served us when we were in a job that had a certain manager, but it doesn't serve us in a job where we have a different leader that may be better, that may be stronger. So overgeneralizations normally will get you in trouble. At the same time, we could not live without belief systems, without filters, and without some form of grouping or chunking of life, because we are affected, even just sitting here right now, me talking with you and reading what's going on, or you listening to what, and tuning into this. There are literally millions of stimuli that are going on around us, whether it be the air that's, flowing past us, a smell, a light, a squirrel that's running by, there, and at the cellular level or at the energetic level, there's so many things that we have no perception of that is coming into our brains, in through our eyes, in through our ears, in through our senses, that our body has to chunk and has to accept without really thinking. Otherwise, we'd go crazy. There's just no way we can handle life with everything that, if we perceived and felt everything that's going on. In fact, sometimes, and I believe I mentioned this in the recorded version, is that, some people that have what are called mental disabilities or challenges are oftentimes, their brain is not able to chunk or to generalize or to group things together. And as a result, they're being bombarded by so much stimuli. They're getting overstimulated and they can't process that. Our brains a normal brain can't handle that. And then they become classified as abnormal because they haven't, for some reason, their brain isn't working the way that most people's brain does. Their belief systems are not grouping things together. Their filters are not filtering things out. If you walk down a street and you had to actually hear every single sound, every single conversation, and feel the energy of everybody that you're walking past or that's around you, you would go crazy. There's just no way to be able to handle that. I know some people that are highly energetically sensitive, and especially after this, I keep saying a lot here. The here we go again. The COVID thing. People have been locked up in their homes, oftentimes by themselves or with a few people. And now that they're having to go out in society again, they're very intimidated because they haven't had that exposure for 12 months, 18 months. Hey, Brian, good to see you. I understand, life has things going on, so don't always get a chance to come in on time. That's fine. Actually, that's one of the benefits of being able to record things as well. But it's really about recognizing that we have many different ways of dealing with life, and oftentimes we just limit ourselves to a few specific tools. And now I'm going to get back to that whole toolkit thing. So the tape measure. The tape measure is about precision. Take a look at what your measuring device is. If your measuring device is off, then everything that you think is true is got a bias to it. So if you're looking at a level, that tells you if something is even, but there's something wrong in that level, so that it actually says that when you're like this, that is level, it's even. Now everything that you perceive in life that looks like this, you're going to say is even, but when it's like this, you're going to say it's off. So we need to be very precise in how we're looking at things. And a tape measure you can sometimes chop an inch or two off of a tape measure, of a yardstick, and then everything that is 30 or the yardstick is normally 36 inches. If you cut 2 inches off, it's 34 inches. But if you think that the yardstick is still 36 inches, everything that you measure is going to be two inches off, but you think it's actually correct at 36 inches. We have to look at our belief systems and how we view life in that same manner. We have to constantly check our measuring devices, our belief systems, our filters, the source of the information that we're getting. And in today's world, that's really important because so much of the information that we're getting is from the internet that is completely unfiltered, and a lot of it is not researched. It's just people giving their opinions, and everybody has an opinion, but that opinion doesn't make it true. And just because 10,000 people follow that opinion doesn't make that opinion true. It just means there's 10,000 people that really never evaluated what was being said as somebody else's opinion. So we have to constantly measure our own belief system, measure the way that we're looking at life, and validate that our measuring tool is still accurate and is valuable in the situation that we're working in. And then sometimes we're in violent agreement. So for instance, in the US, we talk about 1 inch and how big is 1 inch? Okay, an inch is that big. And you go to a European country and they're like, it's 2.454 centimeters equals an inch. So when they say that there's 2.454 centimeters, they're saying the exact same distance, but in different terms. And sometimes we don't equate those. So even though we could be talking about exactly the same thing, we're using different terms to describe it. And sometimes we can get into arguments about the fact that I'm right saying it's 1 inch, and no, you're wrong because it's 2.454 centimeters. We're in violent disagreement. And oftentimes in life, in relationships, we get into these violent disagreements that grow out of control, where we actually are trying to achieve the same goal. We are actually trying to use our tools, our measurements to evaluate what's going on in life. But because we're using a different terminology, we think that, or a different language even, we think that we're at odds with one another. We think that one is right and one is wrong, when actually both of them are right. We're just looking at it from a different perspective, a different language. And language is such an important part of our triad of life, which is about physiology, making sure that your body is hydrated, and if you are in a hunched over position, which oftentimes, if you take a look at Harry Potter, Neville initially, when he was a young kid, he was very much very placid, very hidden behind everything, kind of the if you want to call it the doofus, the person that was afraid of his own shadow. But in the latter part of the Harry Potter series, Neville is like a hero. Neville is the leader. He grew to and changed his belief systems from being one that follows and is weak to being one that is strong and is a leader. We can change those throughout our life. It's all a matter of how we actually look at ourselves, as opposed to having to wait for others to try to validate what our internal measuring systems are. So, since we do have that ability to create and evaluate our own internal measuring systems of what is right, what is wrong, what is strong, what is not, what is in line with my identity and what is not. What is my identity or my belief system doing for me today versus what it did for me yesterday versus what it's going to do for me tomorrow? Because we have that within our capability of change, we can change our lives in an instant. In an instant, just by saying, I don't think that belief system is serving me anymore. I need to look at life a little bit differently because situation has changed. My life has changed. I got new information. I have somebody new in my life. But ultimately, it's not somebody changing us. It's us changing us. We cannot change anybody. Oftentimes that's what we think is happening, is that we can change others. Hey, that's great. I love it. Pernilla and Sweden, I really look forward to being able to see you guys again. And I'm so happy we can interact through at least these live opportunities as well. But going back, we have that power within to change in an instant. It's how long is that instant? How long is it going to take to get to that instant? And really, it's about starting to take back our own strength, to take back our own ideas and perspectives, and to evaluate them and to measure them with an accurate measuring device, which is about bringing together street smart and bringing together book smart together, bringing together my view at this time and bringing together somebody else's view at this time, because it's really playing that devil's advocate that enables us to validate, at least internally, whether something is going to be empowering for us or if it's going to disempower us, if it's going to be stressful for us. So anything that we measure against our belief system and that we take action that is outside of that core identity that we've currently got creates stress in our life. If you can remain congruent, if you can remain in line with your belief systems and you evaluate your belief systems in the way that life is, it will draw that stress out of your body. It's about being congruent. And that was the whole reason that I really started doing these types of things, is to be able to enable people to bring more tools into their toolkit, to understand how a tape measure concept can be used to evaluate what we're experiencing in life and how we're measuring life, and that we have the ability to change that measurement, or we have the ability to validate that measurement. And when we have more tools to deal with life, more ways of evaluating obstacles and opportunities in life, life becomes much more empowering. And we don't get into those levels of depression. Most of the time, levels of depression come in because we get so caught up in a particular measurement or tool, or we didn't validate the measuring devices, the filters, the belief systems that we currently have, and they're not supporting us in our life today. That's when we really get into the stress. That's when the stress can move into depression. That's when depression can take us out of our path forward, because we are so caught up in the vortex that's taking us down. By changing a belief system, you can stop that downward momentum and start to move up again. And that's all within us. It is not something that somebody can do to us, and it is not something that we can do to somebody else. We need to just look at life as that we have control of ourselves, though sometimes it's very challenging and difficult, and we can influence others, but we cannot control them. And the more that we're congruent in what we say and do and believe, the more we can impact others, because we're coming at it with an energy that is congruent and consistent and impactful and powerful. And that is how we can change the world. So Hermione is really just an example of how the feminine, how the girl power in the world today can really be beneficial to recognize the strength of women, which is over half of the population of the earth. And that oftentimes that part of because of the beliefs within certain societies, are pushed down rather than brought up to be equivalent to men. And when I was in business, I always found that if I had women strong women on my team, women that were willing to, stand up, because oftentimes men can try to push things down, or the masculine can try to push things down. When you get through that and you can stand up and bring about that intuition, that empathy, that listening, that internal gut feeling that women and the feminine energy has much stronger than the masculine, that's when a team really comes together and produces results that are phenomenal. When it's only one energy or the other, it's much more challenging. So I'd like to thank everybody for their interaction today. I love it. Hopefully one of these days we're going to be able to actually bring you up on camera here. I wish Brandon the best. I know he's out there trying to get everything ready so he can come out here to Vegas next week and get in the awards, and that we can actually talk to investors about, possibly helping out in bringing Delight Digital Cafe to a greater part of the world. So thank you so much. I appreciate everybody. Anders, Jessica, Pernilla, Lena, Brian, Fernando, thank you for being there. Looking forward to catching up with you next week. We're going to drop a new recording on Monday. We'll talk about it on the Java Delight Show on Monday, and give you an opportunity to watch that before we do our next interactive session. And next week, we're going to have to see, because we're going to be at this conference, so we may have to change the time a little bit. Otherwise, take it easy. Have an amazing, amazing weekend. Remember, it is through the way that we measure and use our measuring tape that oftentimes is the difference between something being empowering and something being not so empowering. Thank you all, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care.